The next question is also from the last broadcast. Svetlana asked, coronavirus seems to be timed to the most important events in Russia, voting for constitution amendments, and the 75th anniversary of the Great Victory. Was it a coincidence? Or is this an information attack with some goals? There is also a complaint that the question itself wasn't answered by you during the last broadcast.
Well, let's answer it now. It was a coincidence. But one has to understand one simple thing. Every head of every country in the world exercises governance under constant pressure from clan corporative groups, which work towards their clan corporative interests. That is how it has been done since the beginning of time. Superstate governance always clashes with the interests of a given country's elite. The original plan of world reformatting was different. The plan was as follows. China solves its issues, then coronavirus slightly touches Europe. Do you remember the pandemic readiness ranking of different countries? According to that ranking, the United States was the most prepared country for any pandemic. The United States was supposed to exemplarily deal with this coronavirus, and Trump should tap himself on the back. Oh, great job, it's done. But what is happening in the United States today? Everything is turning out exactly the opposite of the plan. The United States has the most complex situation with coronavirus in the world. The Western mass media publish quite serious experts' opinions about the population of the United States being surgically attacked by biological weapons. How far these statements are from the truth is too soon to judge. But there is a lot of information that shows this opinion not just has a right to exist, it is also supported by logic and facts. So what happened? When the global predictor was planning to perform a global show on reformatting of the world, they planned to implement certain actions towards each country. The global predictor has a continuous dialogue with Putin. This dialogue can be heard by anyone who has knowledge of the conception of social safety and sufficiently general theory of governance. One just has to look, listen, and everything will be obvious. The global predictor had an agreement with Putin. To ensure a maneuver necessary for the global predictor, Russia has to increase its resource stability. To increase Russia's resource stability, it is necessary to adopt certain amendments to the constitution. The agreement was reached. All right, we will show a certain number of coronavirus cases. We'll do some other things, whatever it takes to adopt these amendments in time. The present situation in Russia is not a con job by the global elite. The issue is that the global elite failed one more time. They couldn't manage the US country elite. The first failure is the case with ISIS. I mean, not the first one in general. There are many cases when the global elite couldn't manage the US country elite, but the first one mentioned by us earlier. ISIS should have succumbed to Iran. Iran should have entered as a victor. ISIS should have been pushed out of Syria, gone to Europe, destroyed all states on its way into Europe, and created the European Islamic Caliphate. That didn't work out. ISIS, in essence, is the irregular army of the United States, and it began to fight Iran for real. The global elite failed. The issue with ISIS liquidation was solved only when Russia entered Syria and got involved in this war. Only then the US country elite was put on heels in this regard. Trump was brought up by the global elite to reformat the United States, withdraw its international state borders, and end its role as a global gendarme. It is similar to what Gorbachev and Yeltsin were doing in their time, and both of them failed. But for Trump and his successors, the future looks bright. Nuclear power industry would be under control, nuclear weapons would be secure, and disassembly and assembly of the United States in a new quality would go as planned. Then remember how the US country elite was fighting against Trump, how powerful and aggressive that fight was. Trump's victory was a shock for the US country elite, and they couldn't do anything about it. But did the US country elite lose interest in toppling Trump and saving the right for the United States to continue to be an international gendarme and rob other countries? The United States is forced to put on the agenda the issue of decommissioning of 2 aircraft carriers to take apart into scrap metal. It has no resources to support existing carrier strike groups, let alone increase its military presence. But the US country elite lacks this understanding. Their logic is, we bought everybody. Who do we have in Russia? Voloshin, Medvedev, Shuvalov, and the rest of the gang. They will destroy Russia for us. Same story in all other countries. They consider each country and think that they have a hold on every country. The US country elite even missed one simple thing: how decisively China was cut off from the US country elite at the elite level during this coronavirus pandemic, when China was locked down. In fact, the US country elite lost an opportunity to influence the domestic policy of China. Personal relations are cut off. Someone was forced to retire. Someone took time off, didn't get arrested, but decided to sit it out. While you figure it all out, I will wait and see. There are different scenarios. The US country elite didn't particularly notice it. They are totally unaware that the world has globally changed. They double down to topple Trump and to save the United States as an international gendarme. In this regard, the US country elite, for the future of the whole world, is a monkey with a hand grenade. The US country elite understand neither state governance nor superstate governance. They don't think about the consequences, because all this time the US country elite was under the global elite watch, and they could get away with their lack of understanding. Now they think that they master that knowledge, but as practice shows, they don't have a clue. Thus, when the US country elite realized that during coronavirus pandemic everything was organized for Trump's benefit, published countries' rankings, Trump's statements about his easy victory over pandemic, it decided to hurt Trump at the expense of American people. That is how much this elite is concerned about the well-being of its nation. The coronavirus epidemic began to flare up in the U.S. country elite's strong stand places. The U.S. country elite tries to push Trump whenever and however they can. Here's the issue about crude oil appears. Saudi Arabia began to push on Russia. Russia's response: no, sorry, we have our state interest, we have a state policy, and we won't step back from our interests and our state policies. Russia dropped the deal. Trump was forced to make enormous efforts to sustain oil production industry in the United States, to revive OPEC Plus formula, and to sign such agreement that wouldn't allow the crash of American economy. Otherwise, uncontrolled processes would start. Look, some American states already started the talks about sovereignty, their own sovereignty. They are ready to leave the USA. Everything is ready to fall apart. But if this dismembering process will be uncontrolled, then it would be impossible to reassemble it later. The US country elite doesn't understand it. Overthrowing Trump is their priority. So what does the US country elite do? One member of the crude oil market dumped all its futures at once and crashed oil prices into negative values. The most important thing here was to hurt Trump, topple him. The future of the economy was not in consideration for them. Trump was the target. Naturally, it was a speculative price and no one reacted to it. Everybody understands the value of these futures and how it works. In principle, world economics moved on. But the strike was pointed at Trump. One of the ways to topple Trump is to put pressure on Russia. Since 1991, Russia lays under the United States, even without a fig leaf that was used by the Soviet Union starting 1955 and increasingly till 1971, when the Soviet Union completely succumbed to the United States and began to support the US dollar by its resources. Russia became a backyard for the United States. We will take as many resources as we need from Russia. Managerial elite in Russia worked for the interests of the United States and was placed exactly for that task. Chubais, Yeltsin, Voloshin, and the rest of the gang. Priority for them is to serve their master. Russia doesn't concern them at all. They need to get some profit in Russia and move outside of Russia. Nothing else regarding Russia is important to them. Chubais suffers a lot because he was told to live in Russia, so he cannot go abroad. Even though he lives on feeding pasture, billions are given to him just for fun of it. His company, Rosnano, for the whole time of its existence, comparable to the period during which Stalin completed industrialization of the Soviet Union, didn't come to the level of self-sufficiency. More than that, if some researchers in some industry research institute develop an invention, it is a common practice now. Well, it is an interesting invention. All right, let's announce that it was done in Rosnano. Researcher: but Rosnano didn't finance this invention, and I don't. Rosnano: if you oppose us, you will be dropped as an author of this invention completely. We know how Rusnana works. Rusnana didn't do anything for Russia, only destroyed it, same as Chubais is doing. Chubais hates Russia. He hates Russians with zoological hatred. The West hates Russia rationally and understands where to put pressure and where to let go. But American lackeys inside of Russia hate it irrationally with animal hatred. They want to destroy Russia, and what will happen next doesn't concern them. The main concern for them is to serve their master. That is why they are an enormous danger for Russia. But American country elite saw that irrational hatred of its lackeys inside of Russia and began to use them to affect the governance of Russia. These lackeys have nothing sacred. Just for demonstration of their power, they destroyed Sayano-Shushanskaya hydroelectric power station, just to make a point. So when Gasudarь addresses people and says everybody needs to stay at home, it is done for a reason. Do you think mobile hospitals are being built with urgency just for fun? No, there is a reason. I have already recommended studying the work war. Everybody needs to realize the war is already here. Military actions of a new type of war are all around us. We are all at war now. Study war and understand how occupation looks like, how confrontation looks like. War is a set of actions directed onto the capture of foreign energetic, natural and human resources. Set of actions by all 6 priorities, by all 5 types of social power, by 5 types of social idiocy, and by all other variables. But to understand the issue of war, one needs to know the conception of social safety and be able to apply the sufficiently general theory of governance. When you master it, everything for you will become clear and obvious. So hiccup happened exactly here. American country elite began to confront the global elite and put much more pressure on Trump, activating all its resources inside a country, any country in the world, especially inside Russia. Accordingly, there was a reaction to that pressure, and it was better to postpone voting on constitution amendments, and it is even for the better people will realize those amendments and understand their necessity. The victory parade was postponed, figuratively speaking, when bullets are flying and shells are bursting on a battlefield. It is a bad time to walk in a ceremonial march, because everybody would be just killed right there. One has to understand what type of a war is taking place right now. What are the methods of that war? The whole territory of the planet Earth is a battlefield now. Russia is the most important sector with the most intense battle. American country elite use COVID dissidents to agitate people, bring them to the streets, making people a target for biological weapons, and play politics with celebratory dates transfer. All of it is being done for one simple reason. They need to destroy Russia, commit a state coup, use the resources of Russia to topple Trump. If they succeed in an attempt of a state coup in Russia, then civilization on the planet Earth will cease to exist. But American country elite doesn't think in those terms. They don't understand it. It is beyond the scope of their notions. Sometimes a reaction to this angle of a view on world events may be as LOL, come on, stop it. It is happening all the time, and now, out of the blue, the civilization suddenly would be destroyed. Yes, suddenly, because according to the law of time, we all live in a completely different society, and this society is on a completely different level of technological development. Chernobyl nuclear power station disaster, it was just a small ringing bell. Bhopal disaster, it was a small ringing bell. Everything may crash with much more devastation, and there will be no place on the planet Earth to get cover with carrying out the current level of civilization development. It will be a pre-flood civilization going nowhere, and after the flood, it will be a toss-up, if, of course, a man will be allowed from above to restore some civilization. But American country elite doesn't bother to think about those matters. They lead the world to a global catastrophe. And Russianist American lackeys do everything in their power to serve their master and destroy Russia. That is why such harsh measures are implemented to stop it. I repeat, the war is happening right now. It must be understood, the war is happening right now. What else needs to be mentioned in this regard? About a bonus which the global predictor will definitely try to use. When coronavirus hysteria and self-isolation will end, a society will be as a Play-Doh, bendable, and it can adopt any form. It is very difficult to change a human psyche during normal life. But when the human psyche is rebooted by stress of isolation, then the human enters a new world, and he is ready to accept new life rules naturally. Thus, we need to be ready for this moment in Russia, and we should start preparing for what will be done upon people in Russia. We must get ready now to protect ourselves. What does this mean? It means that one has to master knowledge about governance of complex social supersystems, knowledge provided in the conception of social safety, COP, and its core, the sufficiently general theory of governance, DOTU. It must be mastered. One has to understand that COP is useless without DOTU, but DOTU is also useless without COP. It is all in one. I hope this time I did answer the question. I wasn't playing around. Not a single process is occurring strictly according to the plan, because other subjects of governance become involved and begin to affect the process following their own interests, and the original plan has to be changed. Here, strong opposition of American country elite led to a reaction from the global elite, who maneuvered in such a manner. But it doesn't take off from the agenda the issues of amendments to the Constitution and carrying out the victory parade.
It was the last question.
I have already mentioned the necessity of theoretical knowledge about the governance of complex social supersystems. Use your free time today. Be ready to protect your interests and the interests of your family. Study the conception of social safety. Study the sufficiently general theory of governance. Become conceptually powerful. Protect your interests and the interests of your family. Peaceful skies over your head. Happiness. Until next time.